The best part of making Friday plans is canceling them. Stay in and watch the Green Bay Packers and Philadelphia Eagles light up Friday night in Brazil. It all starts September 6th at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Peacock. What's on Tap is brought to you by Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the NFL, guys. We're taking a look at the matchups with the highest point totals going into the weekend. And Matthew, we start with Jaguars at Dolphins, where the Dolphins are favored by 3 points at home. The over-under at a whopping 49 points.
Yeah.
How are you ranking Jacksonville's wide receivers this week? This room is pretty crowded going into the year.
Well, you see it right there on your screen. Christian Kirk is the wide receiver I would prefer the most if I'm starting a Jags wide receiver. Miami allowed the 4th highest catch rate last year to the slot, which is where Kirk is going to line up the majority of the time against the Dolphins. 82% of his healthiest games since he's joined the Jaguars, he's gotten at least 6 targets, so I think he's also got the most familiarity with Trevor Lawrence. Again, you think about the outside where you've got Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas, the rookie. They're both fairly new, but Kirk has played with Lawrence for the last couple of years. So if you're starting a Jaguars wide receiver, I think it's Christian Kirk. We love Brian Thomas. I think he's going to play a ton of snaps, and I think he's going to have a very productive rookie year. I'm nervous about him in this game, Connor.
Jay, looking on the Miami side of things, status quo across the board. You got Raheem Mostert, of course, Devon Achane, and the 2 big wide receivers. But this is a good Jacksonville defense.
Yeah, I think the Jags defense will surprise. Tyreek Hill set at 97.5 receiving yards on DraftKings, so he's rolling that back, with Tyreek expected to be the number 1 wide receiver this weekend. So I think with Miami, it really just all comes down to the running backs. I think you're starting Mostert, you're starting Achane. There's no real suspense around that, but this is fascinating. Like, it's going to be very interesting to see just what the snap and carry breakdown is, particularly for Achane.
I agree with that. I think actually I would start both guys in what we expect to be a high-scoring game, and the Dolphins are favored at home. I just want to mention real quickly something on Brian Thomas, who I prefer Brian Thomas to Gabe Davis, just going back there. But Dolphins' 6th fewest touchdown passes allowed on deep passes, which is Brian Thomas's game at this point. The other thing I want to say that I think is just sort of interesting to watch out for, how do they use Jonnu Smith, who's a very fast tight end, who was an acquisition that was sort of under the radar for the Dolphins this year. That's something that we're going to – Tyreek and Waddle, we know. We want to see the distribution of the running backs as well, but I do think that's an interesting storyline to watch as well in this game, is how do they use Jonnu Smith.
Jalen Wright going to be a thing, Connor?
If Mostert gets banged up, which historically he does. I know last year was phenomenal, but wrong side of 30. If you drafted Mostert, you should have taken Jalen Wright at the end of your drafts in every league. That would be my advice, personally.
1,000% there. And the other last thing I'll say here is it'll be interesting to see on the Jaguar side of the ball is, does Travis Etienne get the massive workload that he got last year? There's been talk at the preseason they want to get Tank Bigsby more involved, but they also said that last year,
right?
And then Tank Bigsby did absolutely nothing. So is Tank Bigsby literally just going to be standing on the sideline and maybe he gets, under 5 touches, or is he a bigger part of this offense because they do want to limit somewhat? They don't want Etienne touching the ball 325 times again.
Our next game here, guys, Texans are favored by 3 points, traveling to Indy to take on the Colts. Another high point total, 48.5 points. Matthew, I know you really liked all 3 Texans wide receivers going into this season. Which one is set up to have the biggest week in this division matchup?
And I rank them Nico Collins, Stefon Diggs, Tank Dell in that order, but I think all 3 have a very good chance at smashing. You think about Tank Dell, my, quote, lowest ranked of the 3 wide receivers. Against the Colts last year, 7 for 72 and a touchdown. I think this is going to be somewhat of track meet. I have C.J. Stroud as a top 5 fantasy play as well. Stefon Diggs, much as we talked about early on the show with Saquon Barkley, I think Stroud is going to want to sort of welcome Diggs to the team. They're going to play more in the slot than I think people realize as well. So I do think they make an effort to try to get Diggs into the end zone or a big splash play here or not. And then Nico Collins, of course, is Nico Collins. It's worth noting last year the Colts, bottom 10 in the NFL in terms of catch rate and receptions allowed on deep passes. So you can beat the Colts deep. They will take those shots. This game's indoors at Indianapolis on the turf. So I think it's a bit of a track meet, especially on the Texans side of the ball.
Jay, with the Colts right now, especially with Josh Downs banged up going into the season, is their offense in fantasy as narrow as, Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman?
I think so. I mean, Jonathan Taylor set at 74.5 rushing yards in this matchup as an underdog. For a little context there, that's like 10 yards higher than Saquon Barkley in tonight's game. Right. So this is going to be, I think, Jonathan Taylor's offense. Just going back to the Texans for a second, on DraftKings, thought this is interesting. Nico Collins, 66.5 yards is his receiving prop. Diggs, 60.5. Tank Dell, 51.5. So very closely bunched together. I would have thought there might be a bit more separation between Collins and Diggs, for instance, but I think that is just the fact that we don't know how this is going to turn out. And I think Diggs is the big variable, right? Because if he is the guy from the first half of last season, then this is a completely different offense and complexion. If he's more the second half of the guy, then he could be the third guy in the pecking order.
Count me in the first half of the guy. I think Diggs has a nice year. I think Diggs, it's a 1 year prove-it deal. It's a
contract year.
It's a contract year. It's a 1 year prove-it deal. He doesn't have to have the entire passing offense on his shoulders. He's gonna he's gonna sing single coverage. He's gonna see like the second and third best cornerback on the team at certain times. So I think Diggs eats the chief ball officer and friend of the podcast.
That's right. He
Stefon
is the chief
Diggs.
ball officer.
He is the chief ball officer.
Never
forget.
Our final game here, guys, Cardinals at Buffalo, -6.5 for the Bills here, a touchdown favorite against a rebuilding and maybe resurging Arizona team that has a lot of talent now. The point total is at 47. Matthew, when you look at this Buffalo offense that we just talked about, Stefon Diggs off to Houston, can you trust any Buffalo pass catchers besides Dalton Kincaid?
Trust is a strong word, Connor. Again, we don't know how it's going to play out. Is Curtis Samuel active? How much does he play? He's been banged up as well, so we're waiting to sort of see kind of what the status is of Curtis Samuel. I think Khalil Shakir is somebody that I think is kind of interesting. It's worth noting, to your point, Shakir has his prop line on DraftKings 44.5, Keon Coleman 31.5, Curtis Samuel 27.5, and I think if we knew that Curtis Samuel wasn't playing in this game, obviously the Shakir prop line would go up. Look, James Cook made the love list. We talked about him a lot yesterday as well. Dalton Kincaid's going to get his. I don't know that I feel great about any Bills pass catcher other than Kincaid and Cook out of the backfield until we sort of see how this all plays out. But I will say that if I have to start a non-Dalton Kincaid pass catcher on the Bills this week, give me Khalil Shakir.
Yeah, on that point, Dalton Kincaid set a 51.5 receiving yards. That's the highest prop of any Buffalo Bill. I mean, he has to be the only tight end in the league who has the highest receiving prop on his team, wide receivers included. So just goes to emphasize just how important Kincaid is to this offense.
Yeah, they tell you that week one lies a lot. I feel like we can learn a lot about this game.
Yeah.
We're going to see Marvin Harrison Jr. playing a meaningful game. We're going to see Kyler Murray with more weapons, your fantasy ride or die.
Yeah.
And we're going to see how the Bills use their variety of pass catchers.
Yeah, especially again, we've had jokes and some fun with like Greg Dortch, the human Dortch, but I am fascinated to see does he play if he plays 70% of the snaps, he plays 75% of the snaps, if he is their true slot guy, which is my expectation, and then it's really just Zay Flowers or Zay Jones, not Zay Flowers. Still
Michael
in Baltimore mode. Right, so Michael Wilson or Zay Jones on the outside competing for that, opposite Marvin Harrison, but Dortch is the slot guy, that's my expectation. Dortch, again, who's available in a ton of leagues, not in a league I'm in, but he's available in a ton of other leagues, becomes really interesting, I'm telling you. But yeah, so my ride or die does, people are so excited about Trey Benson, but I'm a believer that James Conner is going to be a workhorse back. I think this game will be closer than people think. The Bills are almost a touchdown home favorite. I think the Bills play them tough. Give me the Bills to cover in this one. I'll just call that right now.
You mean the Cardinals?
Sorry, give me the Cardinals. Thank you. Sorry, I'm talking. Whatever. I'm in 3 hours sleep. Give me the Bills.
We're excited for the game tonight now.
What? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my God. They really should send me to Brazil. The Bills are almost a touchdown home favorite, and I believe the Cardinals cover this game as a road dog.
I think the Cardinals are going to lose a lot of games 31-28 type of thing, where they're going to be very frisky. Their defense just isn't very good, but the offense is legitimate, and Kyle is legitimate, and it should keep them in a lot of games.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest RotoWorld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.